Let me guess, you're from the town that I love best. Talk Memphis, I wish you would. Talk Memphis, you sound so good.
Today's show, we're going to talk about why investors sell their properties. I get that a lot.
Yeah.
I get that question.
Investors and homeowners.
Investors and homeowners, but I get all the time
About why the investor's selling.
why is this guy selling?
Right.
You know, because it's a valid question from the buyer's end, meaning why is what's the catch?
Yeah, what's the catch?
If
Why?
this was so
what
good,
am I jumping into?
Yeah, if this was so good, why in the world is he selling it? So we get that a lot. Let's dive right into this, Dan, and let's talk about why some of these guys sell. We've got, it looks like 40-something reasons here why they might. I don't know that we'll get to all of these, but that's a lot of information.
Yeah, man.
But
This
why
was a fun one because people think there's just a couple reasons why people sell, and you start kind of slicing and dicing it, and it's like, wow.
Whoa, there's a bunch of reasons why you might be selling.
A ton.
Typically, mine is the clients I work with, they're either retiring, they want out of the daily or weekly upkeep of their portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
Or moving, or we got too many kids, we want to cut, whatever it may be. I get some of that. But why do people sell? 40 reasons why homeowners and investors sell. What do you hear a lot? What's some of the first things that come to your mind?
Well, I think part of this whole exercise was good for me, just from to eliminate that limiting belief that there are no deals, there are no houses.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we'll show through all this is that life happens. There's always something going on with somebody's life, or emotions,
divorce, death. There's all kinds of stuff, disabilities.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So just this past, say, 3 months, I could probably, we'll use an example later on, but Douglas and I have probably put for sale or have sold for 3 or 4 different reasons, just ourselves. Mm-hmm. So anyway.
You guys have a pretty good agent too working with you, don't you?
Yeah, I can't remember his name. He's all right. He just throws it out there and hopes.
Pompous jerk, but boy, he sells them pretty quick.
That's right. The first kind of section that we talked about was just the actual house, where it sits and what's the deal with the house. Is it too small, too big? Mm-hmm. The layout. This is kind of more towards the homeowner themselves, but versus an investor. But I kind of tied them all together. A neighborhood changes. Think about what kind of things happen in neighborhoods,
Man, gangs
can happen, crime, bad neighbor.
Blight.
How many times you hear about a neighbor that they just can't get along, like, what was it, the McCoys and the Hatfields and McCoys back in the day?
Always on each other.
No neighbors. I've heard that one before. Just kind of feel isolated, desolate, there's some boarded up houses or,
I was about to say the boarded up house is can be a trend. If you get one boarded up, that neighbor's like, ooh, I want to get out of here because of the crime that's coming there. Well, now they're gone and there's another boarded up.
One. Yep.
Then 2 other people are, we better get out of here.
The city's torn down, several right beside you. And now you got just vacant land that used to have houses. And now you kind of feel, isolated, if you will, with just people don't like to have trees and brush. You know what I mean?
Right next to them.
Right next to them. There's some people that won't like woods, but I wouldn't call that woods.
No, vacancies bring unwanted features.
Yeah.
Crime, things we just listed, but the yards aren't well maintained, snakes, and literally just some of the very small, minor things that can affect you, but can really start ruining a street.
Yeah. And the interesting thing as you go through all this, at the end of the day, most of it is emotion related, which is emotion / feeling, mental type. Does that make sense? Like
from the investor
from
standpoint,
the investor or the homeowner,
I'm tired of this. I'm fed up with this. I'm fed up with this. Let's sell it.
Like talking about like the lot beside you being vacant. That not necessarily wouldn't bother me. I'd probably cut down what I could.
Cut it myself.
Yeah. Have some different things. But I've even heard airplane flight pass.
We get that here.
Yeah, absolutely. FedEx could change.
Land so many planes.
The airport authority could change the direction, and all of a sudden you got planes flying over neighborhoods that didn't used to happen.
And you know what? That's true. A place I used to live in DeSoto County, when I first moved in there, I didn't realize this, of course, but the flight path was right
there.
And I was like,
Probably
oh
where
my
they-
gosh, what have I gotten
They
into?
probably round out where you
Yeah.
were and then come back into
That's
the
right.
south.
And then about 6 months later, it was gone.
They changed.
They changed it. So either they were coming in too short or whatever it might be. But yes, so that kind of thing can change. You know, tenant turnover.
Yeah. That's a
big
That's a
one.
big one.
Because an investor, if they turn over every year, you're not going to make money.
I mean, we just had. I mean, this is what's fun about this. I probably could have an example of every one of these from a investor. I mean, I just had one this past week where the guys let the house deteriorate to a certain point, so the roof needs to be done. There's siding damage. I mean, he really literally he could spend $10,000 or $12,000 on that house, and it really needs it because it's deteriorating. I mean, a roof is $5,000, just boom, like by itself. Just if you want to do it right, tear off
and lay over.
And his point was, man, that's because it's in a lower end neighborhood. Say $600 rent. I mean, 600 times 12, 72. He goes, man, that's 2 years worth of rent. That's before taxes, insurance, maintenance. So he would rather cut his losses, maybe even lose, say, $5,000, sell that house and let somebody else capitalize, buy it for 25, put that 12 in it. Now you're in at 35 for a $600 rental. They'd rather that happen, and the cash flow still works for the next investor.
And
so it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad deal for the guy buying it.
Yeah.
But the guy, because he's already put on a note and all that kind of stuff, he just didn't manage it properly. Either he didn't buy it right with, fixing up on the front end, or he's just owned it this whole time. It's just deteriorated to that point, hadn't kept it up.
How many clients do you feel like, this is maybe veering off on the side road here, but how many clients do you feel like buy and sell based off the tenant? They're not looking at the asset. They're looking at the contract for the asset. In other words, I try to look at it as buying a business. When I buy a house, I'm buying a business. Are
they looking at the tenant ledger and the lease?
Yeah. So in other words, are you banking your entire valuation or the majority of your valuation based off the current status of the property? Because I get this a lot. I get this more than
I would say. Let's see what you think, but I think your initial investors' first purchases, it's a huge deal.
It is a huge deal.
And as they go along, it becomes less and less because they realize that contract really doesn't mean squat.
No.
The ledger, I think, means something.
The history of the house.
But a tenant can change on a dime.
In a minute, they can change.
I mean, I get that all the time where they just bought it and then the next month they're late. And because, like we do stuff with roof stock and stuff like that, they want to sell it right back to roof stock.
Yeah.
The second month after I've had at least 2 or 3 just like that.
Because the tenant vacated or something, or they quit paying or slow paying.
Yeah, just all of a sudden they stopped paying. They were quote unquote paying the previous person, but when we took it over, the tenant goes ghost on us or just plays games, and
which happens.
So that investor wants to sell it right back.
Which I think is a bad mistake. You tell me, maybe we differ in this. To me, is a bad mistake. Because you're buying a home, you're buying a house,
right? You're not buying the
bricks and mortar. No, you're not buying that tenant. The tenants are nuts. Well, you know what? I mean,
they're looking at strictly the numbers that they want to make that first year. They're not looking at a 30-year approach.
No.
So when you do that, so like that guy, like the one I'm thinking about, has wasted, for lack of better words, by the time it's all over, he'll have wasted 6 months and his money.
And
if you look at the return on that, it's going to be negative because he's going to have some cost. There's no way he's going to get 100% reimbursed for all that.
No, and I just see him. I had the conversation yesterday with the guy. Well, what happens if the tenant, he wants to base his offer? Well, that tenant's a little behind, man. What if I have to evict him? Like, well, maybe you factor some of that into your offer, but you're not buying this tenant.
No, you're not buying the tenant.
You're buying the property that goes with it, and it's up to you, I guess, to put the tenant in there. Yep. But anyway, let's get back to
keep going.
Why they sell. What else do you hear, Dan?
Vandalized. Occasionally you'll see. I had one yesterday. So funny, it's top of mind stuff, but an owner called me from Atlanta and has 7 houses here, has one that just somehow the current property manager wasn't on top of, and the people got in, poked big holes in it, created all kinds of damage, and they got a $20,000 bid, and they're freaking out, not knowing what to do. And so you either bite the bullet, cut your losses, and sell it as, I mean, like,
this doesn't happen every time.
No.
But this is something you got to know.
You got to know
going into this. This can happen to you.
Right? House could be condemned.
Mm-hmm.
We've had that happen before. Where an owner didn't take care of a property, and like subfloor issues, or you know what I mean, like
something serious.
Something serious where it's just not the safest habitable place where children could fall or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Fire, flood, mold, foundation, lead. All those are kind of like stuff that happens to houses that cause. Douglas and I've had 2 fires in the last 60 days. And so we're trying to figure out.
Really?
Trying to sell them.
And he had 1.
So we've got 2 lots, basically. 2 half houses or 2 lots.
2 half
maybe
houses.
Maybe I'll say, hey, sell the lot for 15 and give you a free house, free half of a house. But that's why we're going to sell, right? Because we just don't want to fix that house up. And, for the money, we, way our insurance is structured. So we're going to let it go. And then infestation is another one you see every once in a while.
Man, if you're selling for, I'll be honest with you.
By the time we finish this, maybe nobody will want to buy.
You're right.
Like
you're selling for some of these reasons. I think you're in the wrong.
And these are extreme. Let's make sure we caveat that. These are extreme reasons that people get into selling. I haven't seen a snake infestation. I've seen roaches. I've had roaches fall on my head walking through a front door. That was not. I don't do well with that.
You scream like a girl. Waving your hands in the air like you just don't care.
Our buddy Michael Hayes, a good friend of ours, he called me one day and he had remember that posted picture of the pants he left?
Yeah.
I don't think that's really his, I think.
But he said some other dude left in a hurry, man.
And I was like, I just remember, it was in Berkeley. I went to a house. Somebody wanted me to check it out to buy, and all of a sudden there's, fleas all over me. By the time we got to my truck, I realized it. I started dancing around. Like,
it was Michael had that white suit on.
Oh yeah.
That he went into the home and came back out and showed it. It had fleas all over him. And holy cow! And
the owner, doesn't want to spend any more money.
They're done.
He just wants. So that's a deal, because you can fog that joker.
Oh man,
get somebody a couple white suits
in a heartbeat.
And you're probably gonna get a discount of $5,000+ because he's like, he's not spending another dime. He's not gonna go in there because all those fleas. But anyway,
this one is one that's more of a personal and more of a background kind of check or reason, but financial reasons. What are some of the financial reasons, Dan, that some of these investors might sell?
Just lost their job, so they're scared. Have another financial obligation. Had some
private school,
trying to have kids, that can drive, when you have a worry of, you got assets over here with a debt and a note, if you will. Overhead. And you got something going on, like say you're going to do, some sort of pregnancy or adoption or something like that, and you need $30,000 and you just don't want to have that burden. So you see that kind of stuff. Deferred maintenance on the property.
Tell me what you mean by deferred maintenance. I know, but tell.
Well, it's just like that example I used when we first started. Just somebody that just did the bare minimum every time for the last 7 or 8 years, and
I made the mistake.
It just caught up with you because I really talk a lot about fascia, soffit, roof. You got to fix that stuff on the front end.
You should,
because it only runs
and gets
worse and worse, and that dollar just starts to snowball on you as far as the cost to replace. So, and cause additional damage.
I made that mistake. We admit that the first one I bought several years ago, I didn't do the full rehab. I kind of skimped out on it, and the maintenance calls after that were killing me.
Yeah,
I sold the property.
Yeah,
we're killing.
You moved on because of that.
I did move on. That's a classic example. I was upset about it. I was mad. I cannot believe that every single tenant, I had 3 tenants, and all 3 of them were calling on some of the same stuff that I could have fixed on the front end and didn't do it.
Right.
Costly mistake. Learn from it. Don't do it again.
I think you emailed me every day when you were in that house.
And I was up.
What do you do? Why is this? It was wearing you out.
Not going how it's supposed to go. And that's a lesson that we've been preaching to the listeners. It was a lesson for me. Yeah. Sometimes you get into investing and it doesn't go exactly how you want it to go. But what you don't do, It's what I chose not to do, is quit.
Yeah, and I think you're a good example of, for this deferred maintenance, like you're putting $1,000 to $1,500 extra in each house to change the supply lines, change the faucets, snake the drains. So when that tenant moves in, they're gonna have a great experience, and you don't have all these calls that are wearing you out. So
there's nothing worse than a leaky toilet that you have to call and send a guy out there. That's $80.
Right.
He's going to put a $20 part in it.
Right.
And then next thing you know, it's $125 for something that you could have fixed on the front rehab bin for $50 and been done with it.
As a bigger picture. Yeah.
That's right.
Total.
That's right.
Total expenses are getting too much. We talked a little bit about that. Kids, school, taxes, adoption, change of events of life, that just happen that are just drawing your money away, so that you just don't want that burden or potential burden on the house. Not say the house is a burden, but they just see it as, this could be an anchor to me trying to do the next thing.
Which these are all legit reasons.
Sure.
I mean, it doesn't mean that the asset's bad.
Right.
It just means that there's something that's happening in that guy's or gal's personal life,
right,
that is causing them to have to sell. So I guess, the message that I'm trying, we're throwing out a whole lot of these, and they're not silly, but we're throwing out a whole lot of these, like what people would deem as excuses or reasons. But these are legit things that sellers and owners go through that cause them to sell. It does not always mean that the asset's bad. Do owners sell properties because the asset's bad? Absolutely. Sure. That happens.
Right.
But I would say 7 out of 10 times, it isn't because the property itself is bad.
Sure.
It has something to do with that investor in their personal life or what's going on with the business. I mean, they might have a portfolio of 50 and can't handle it. They're upside down, so they got to get rid of some of it. So those are those financial reasons.
Foreclosures coming.
Foreclosures imminent. Mm-hmm.
I mean, the house is underperforming, losing money. You kind of mentioned that. I mean, Douglas and I are doing that right now with some, our lowest performing houses. We're just going to cut our losses and move on. But
even those, I because I'm selling those aren't bad assets though. If you're just at a point to where you can't dedicate maybe the time and the man hours that it's going to take to bring those back to life. I mean, I've sold a couple of them to some guys. They've got back in touch and they want some more. So if they weren't performing and they did, but what they did on the front end was a little extra work. Let's get this thing up a little bit, to a little bit higher level of our standards, and they're ready to buy more.
One of our clients' friends, partners, strategic partner. I mean, like he bought one of them and down near the river, 38109.
Oh boy!
And sent me pictures of it the other day, and I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, it looked like it should be in East Memphis. Like
nice,
nice tile, nice cabinets, nice countertops. I mean, he's like, well, it didn't cost as much as it looks. I mean, I was like, man, So hopefully he gets a good tenant out of that, that wants to, that just will fall in love with that place and stick to it. But we just didn't want, to your point, didn't want to put that money back in it, So we didn't see the vision for that for ourselves. But
so financial, that's right. Financial reasons are big. House related items, financial reasons. We've mentioned some of these, but the next one, the kind of category is personal reasons.
Yeah.
We listed some here and we'll go through them, but there's a million of these. You could have anything and everything, new job or transferred away.
Yeah.
I've had that happen. I had a guy wanted me to sell 3 here. He's like, I'm moving.
Yeah.
Like, well, we manage. He's like, yeah, I know, but it worries me. And he's like, I'm just
the mileage thing gets people. Either people can do it or they can't. There's no in between.
I sit here and I sell investment property to people out of state
all day, every day.
All day, every day. I wonder how I would feel about buying one out of state. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
because to reverse it, I asked my investors to trust me. I'm like, you got to trust me and know that I'm not going to put you. It's a big leap of faith, and I would definitely.
I haven't done it.
Nah, I hadn't done it either. I mean,
hopefully I will.
You'd like to think you'd expand one day and get into some different markets, but. There's a reason why we're sitting here, and this is called the Memphis Real Estate Hour too.
Right.
Memphis has got its own thing. I guess if I lived somewhere else and knew about Memphis, I'd probably be coming in here too. Right. Yeah, trying to buy. So maybe it's just we're a product of circumstance. But personal reasons, connecting with family, too close, too far away, need a fresh start or a new challenge. This next one, I'll let you read the next one, Dan. Emotional stress.
It's too stressful, painful memories. You know, I you hear that a lot with the wholesalers and stuff. Like, you know, they inherited the house and it was their grandmother's house. And they just can't see them ever
Keeping it and
going to it, and just all the, you know, the pain of that. Just a reminder, and you know, and nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's just, and that just creates a reason that somebody wants to sell. You know, the whole. I mean, I talked to had lunch with a lady yesterday from California that came in town, and she, you know, she owned houses in her backyard. So she's actually flipped what we just talked about. Like, she owned houses in her backyard, so she felt like she needed to manage them because they were in her backyard. But she's like, I didn't like all those calls, all the dealing with the maintenance, da 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 da. So they sold those, and now they're going to invest, you know, 1,500, 2,000 miles away in Memphis, because that seems like an easier option because the cash flow is better, and they can find I mean, her whole point to come in here was to find a trusted team to work with. But she actually did the opposite. You know, to get that emotional stress. She's like, I'm not going back to managing. Yeah. It's too stressful. She owns her own business, pretty cool business, but that's where her focus needs to be. And so when she was answering tenant calls and doing leases and maintenance, was taking her eye off that, you know, her main business.
I love your note here. Don't like the responsibility, millennials.
Yeah.
Explain that, Dan.
Yeah, that's right. That. I think Caleb wrote this one.
Yeah.
You know, I think people sell because kind of that. I mean, we talked to a neighbor the other day that wants to potentially move to Trezevant. Yeah. So you got Trezevant. I mean, you got older that don't want the yard, don't want the upkeep, the maintenance. You know, let this be somebody else's problem. I mean, Grant Cardone talks about this all the time. He, like, swears he'll never own a house. You know, just
he doesn't. He rents.
He rents and just wants to move where he wants to move, and you know, and
not be tied to the actual property.
That's right. And let somebody else.
It's surprising to hear that too from a real estate guy.
Oh yeah,
that he's not an owner.
I don't know if he is. I mean, he talks
he's
about not.
Own
you would think he would.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't listen to him enough to know, but I know he talks a ton about not. I mean, just hammers you in the face about you just don't own. You know, so you have that flexibility. Let it be in somebody else's problem, but what you do own, make it an investment. So. Yeah. There's that.
I could go. We could halt there and have a whole new show of own versus rent. As a matter of fact, it's not a bad topic.
Yeah, I'm glad I thought of that.
Yep.
Writing that down now.
Own versus rent. I'm glad that I threw that up.
That's right.
I like your next one too. Tired of being a landlord and going to prison. Clearly, you've had that happen to you.
Well, I mean, I've heard, you know, wholesaler friends that gone to prisons and to get a guy to sign a
I've
house.
Actually heard of that too. I've heard.
I mean, it sounds crazy.
The same person, but I've literally had somebody tell me that there was. I don't know if he was the sole owner, but he was on.
He was tied to the deed.
He was tied on it somehow, and they had to have his signature, and he was incarcerated.
Yeah.
So they had to go and visit the man and get him to sign it. And I think where they take him a carton of smokes or something. You know, that's
right. Buy him something for the canteen or whatever.
I mean, that's currency in prison. So I mean,
so we both heard the story. So like, it's a legit reason that people sell. They're going to prison or are in prison, and they got a house out here, and they don't, you know, families feeding off of it and don't know what.
Don't know what to do.
What to do. So get rid of it. They don't want to be a landlord. I mean, we hit that. We probably hit that. That's probably one of the top.
I get a lot of that. Man, I'm sick of being a landlord. Man, they won't pay the rent. I was like, for one, great. Give me your property. Let me sell it because I'm going to give it to somebody that's going to handle it right.
Right.
We talk about this all the time. Don't be the landlord.
Right.
You know, set up a business. If you want to set up a hobby, and set up a hobby and manage them yourself and get pissed off about it and sell them.
Yeah.
You want to set up a business, then set up a business. Get you a banker and a property manager and a this and a that. I mean, set it up to where you can succeed. That man, the landlord and yourself stuff, as you have told us, is a nightmare.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's a ton of work.
It's a ton of work. I mean, it's just not the quickest and the best. I mean, that's why you listen to this show, so you can avoid having to do stuff like that.
Drugs. Mm-hmm. Drugs is another one that people get into that, you know, either their kids or them themselves, and they've ran through all their money, and all they've got now is the house, and so they've got to.
How often you see that?
Several times a year. I mean,
Really?
Yeah. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
but that's a life-changing event, if you will, because
Sure.
they were running a stable life, doing everything's good. And then they get in drugs, and then all of a sudden it just tanks, and, they've ran out of money, and they've got to figure out something else, which probably leads into pre-foreclosure, back tax. I mean, they're probably all related. So a little bit of both, your the root cause kind of thing, like you're saying you got to sell because it's about to be foreclosed on or back taxes, but
really,
drugs could
really
be
got a drug problem.
You got a drug problem that's feeding the reason why you're not being responsible. So
the last one we kind of had here was life cycle of retirement, empty nest. I mean, to be honest with you, I get the retirement one frequently.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I got one right now. We're liquidating, Mr. Wade's there, 20-something houses. He's just trying, he's retiring. He's just
retiring, moving on.
Yeah, he's just done with it.
Put money in.
Yeah, something else.
Annuity or market.
Very conservative. Just literally retiring. Changes in relationships, divorce. I mean,
that's probably the most common. It creates
a huge mess.
Yep.
Because what are you going to do? You got to figure out the appraised value of the properties, the debt that's owed, split what are you going to split the equity in the home? I mean, it's a whole thing.
Yeah, I was texting with a guy this weekend talking about divorce of a partnership.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the truth.
I was asking about owner finance, that's one of my first questions I always ask.
Yeah.
He's like, well, I just need to be done with these houses because I'm just trying to go our separate ways with my partner, and, and then divorce, like you said, it just gets to where there's one that I dealt with, guys in Arkansas, husband and wife, had probably 8 houses with us. And it literally, I would get emails flipping them back and forth to each other. We're about to settle, give them to her. Oh, wait a second, that's not going to work. I mean, we probably switched them back and forth 2 or 3 times, and so.
Lawyers are the ones getting rich.
Yeah, lawyers are just having fun playing ping pong with those, But, death of a spouse or family member,
I've gotten that several times.
That somebody's died that just create a trigger that you need to sell that house or, move out of that house or, you're not the one that inheriting it, that kind of thing. So
Douglas is helping with one of those right now.
Yep. So you got a package that spouse died and you got these assets in the wife or husband.
Yep.
Typically the wife doesn't know what to do with them. And she's got to get rid of them because she doesn't know that wasn't her thing. She relied on her spouse to take care of it. So
I'm trying to teach Amber how to do this.
Yeah.
I really am.
That's good.
I'm trying to teach her how to I think it's advice for everybody is, if you're an investor and you have that, don't leave your wife out in the cold.
That's right.
Teach her at least how to maintain them.
Yeah. And who the contacts are.
Yeah. I mean, like that's the thing. Like you're not just building wealth for yourself and building a business. I mean,
trying to create a legacy.
These houses aren't going anywhere.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like it's not like there's a time limit. You can only earn your money for so long on them. I mean, these things could be for generations, my kids and, that sort of thing. So yes,
that's a good point.
Teach your wife how to at least manage the manager.
Yep.
So to speak.
That's right.
Let's talk for a second about
inheriting.
Inheriting a house. I mean, so I get that some. I don't know what to do with it. I mentioned that actually at the beginning of every show. If you've got that old home that you've inherited or is beat up and burnt out or whatever, call us. We'll buy that thing. But that, how often do you get I inherited this or I can't afford it?
That's a lot.
Really?
Yeah, because you get a house, you either don't want it because you don't want to be a landlord, never wanted the house in the first place, don't know what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't afford it, which then leads to not wanting it. You might want it, but then you can't afford it. You might live in Florida and have a house here, and you just can't get your head around using a third-party management and managing from afar. And it's just, again, emotional burden, so you just say, I'd rather just be done with this house, so, and then some people just don't want to take care of it.
They just don't want to deal with it.
It's just, again, emotional drain on, how do I pay that taxes and how do I make sure the insurance? What if the insurance? Do I have enough coverage? And all those questions that come with not having that house like right in your backyard or your personal house. People can get their head around their personal house, kind of sink in and live how to live in a house that they're being homeowner, but not one they inherit. That just happened to us. Mother died 8 years ago, and the daughter lived in the house, and two brothers just kind of watched over her. She fell and lost her short-term memory, and they had to swoop in and put her in assisted living, and they had to sell that house so that they know that she's taken care of in that assisted living for the next umpteen years. And that's what they're going to do with the proceeds. Probably had $180,000 proceeds going straight to her for her long-term care.
Help take care of her.
So that's a good example.
Always heard of the 4 Ds to wrap up, this actual the reasons why people sell. What are the 4 Ds? Death,
disability, divorce, drugs. Those are the 4 that I've always heard since I first started. But as you got into this, and some of them are intertwined in this, but
I was about to say you could pretty much
probably half the list
stick one of these Ds: death, disability, divorce, or drugs, with everything we mentioned.
That's right.
That's right. They could all be kind of commingled. What talk about here in our last 6-7 minutes here? Talk about what did this exercise make you think of? What did it make you realize? What are some of the points that we want to get across to the listeners?
Well, I think just there always will be opportunities. And we don't use absolutes very often, but I think there will always be opportunities because life happens, and between the 4 Ds or just emotional issues or life-changing issues besides these 4 Ds, some of those triggers are going to always create opportunities.
Yep.
And so now the opportunities might, like right now, everybody wants to be in a wholesale and all that good stuff. And so you constantly hear, I kind of got out of it for a while, but now I'm kind of back in the emails, and an investor will send me that house, and I'll get the same house
from 3 other guys.
From 2 or 3 other guys.
Just talked about this at lunch yesterday.
Did you? Yeah. So, and they all think they got the in on the deal. You know what I mean?
And really they're all out.
And they're all out because nobody has the contract. They're trying to just guarantee that they can close to the, get the right price to that buyer. And so it's a frenzy right now. But
what's really fun is when they start passing out my listings. Got another one of those this week.
Did you really?
Yeah, wholesalers picking up listings and passing them out. It's great.
I just don't understand that.
No, because they usually
if they disclose it, maybe.
Even then, I can't pay them.
No, because they're not licensed agents.
Right. So I'm not allowed to pay them. But
So what do they have to do there? They have to put it under contract, act like they're going to double close it, and make their fee.
The seller can choose to go do that. The seller's got to pay me.
They can put that on the contract and sign it. Can they do that?
If they can write a contract
on an MLS deal,
and if the seller agrees to sign that, he understands that this wholesaler is going to go assign it out. They can do that. I will never advise my client to get under contract with a wholesaler. No offense to the wholesalers, but there's just no certainty.
There's no certainty.
They're not going to. They're for sure not closing.
Right.
We're going to get under contract in the hopes that someone else can go sell it. That's what they hire me to do. So no,
that's a good point.
So
go ahead.
We went through these, 40 or so reasons that people sell.
Yep. It's amazing that
there's that many.
I bet there's 100. I'm just touching the surface.
And some of them you're like, oh, well, of course they're going to sell. And a lot of them are like that. Mm-hmm. You get stuff that's very common. Yeah, of course they're selling for that. But I'm in charge of trying to relay that message to a new buyer. Mm-hmm. Why? What's going on? So it's not always. The biggest thing when we brought this topic up that I wanted to get out was investors aren't always selling because the home's a piece of crap. It's just not the case. They could be.
Could be.
But also, too...
But you can also turn that...
I was about to say, if you get it for a good deal, maybe they're just not taking care of it properly. Maybe they're not managing
Maybe they're not investors.
Maybe they're not investors. That's the biggest thing. The definition of an investor goes way deeper than, just slinging some money around. You got to be legitimate, methodical. You've got to make this thing a business, and you've got to be professional about it. Opens up the conversation with sellers. So, when you go in and you're talking to somebody about selling and you try to get to the real root of what's going on, I don't do that to be nosy. I do that so I can better help them. Yep. Like, how can is this a desperate situation? Do you need to sell this home today? Or is this hey, we're just, gradually trying to get rid of it? So, yes, it does open up the real conversation with the seller.
and I'll give you an example for that. A guy that I'm talking to right now for us to buy, I think can't remember 7 or 9 houses, and his big, and he wants to finance. He's financed all his houses to us to this point, and he's down to his last 7 or 9. I can't remember the number. And he's 63, and he's ready. I mean, he's looking at retirement. So he's making sure, in his price and his terms, we're trying to work that out so that he's taken care of for the next, 10, 20 years with those assets. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I am trying to figure out the best way to help him be successful in that for his retirement. And so that's what's driving the conversation. So kind of, getting all this to say, you got to figure out why, if you're negotiating and all that kind of stuff. A listing is a little bit different, I would say, because somebody's already made the decision
to sell. But
if you're in conversation with people that own or of a house that comes across, you got to figure out why they're selling and what's their goal. What's the goal with that sale or whatever. So then hopefully you can help somebody.
Yeah.
That's the whole bigger picture.
We joke about that. We'll help get a great deal. But I mean, in all seriousness, you can be helping. I mean,
absolutely. I truly believe that.
You and I think at least in half the situations, you're legitimately helping. Are you getting a good deal on a home? Yeah, of course. But you never know what they're going through.
That's right.
Unless you really find out. I mean, there could be some bills they've got to pay and things. I mean, you never know what you're doing by giving them that rush of cash or that influx of cash, what they're able to do with it. So,
yep.
I think it's a good topic. I think it's something that listeners wanted to hear. I get the question a whole lot. Why are they selling? So,
people ask that. That's one of the top questions.
I get this a ton. Why are they selling?
Yeah.
Especially from my national investors, and I don't blame them for asking. There's just sometimes I either don't know that answer because hadn't been communicated, or it's something of one of these 40-something topics that we gave you today.
That's
so
right.
now, really good information. I appreciate you coming in today.
Yeah,
thanks a lot.
Good stuff.
I swear I can't get